about some of what's been going on with Maya Angelou in this quarter. You guys saw that Maya Angelou has a new quarter that has her beautiful image on it, and I think it's awesome. And I think Maya Angelou deserves it 100%. Um, but the question is, is the Maya Angelou quarter kind of a weapon of mass distraction, right? Because the thing about it is, as much as everybody loves Maya Angelou, I don't really know how many people were saying that this is the thing that Black people want. Like, this is the one thing we need in order to be happy and whole. And I'll tell you what. It's one of those things where where you want to be grateful for the recognition, and also symbolism has its place. But the thing about it is that symbolism is kind of like the icing on a cake, right? The reason symbolism can be very dangerous is because when you're serving a cake, you don't just give a bunch of icing and then say, okay, now that you've had all the icing, there's no need for any cake, right? You don't do that. You say, thank you for the icing, I appreciate that, but I really need the cake also. And so Maya Angelou being honored to me is icing on the cake. The cake is things like reparations. The cake is a multi-trillion-dollar Marshall Plan to rebuild urban communities. The cake is some sort of systematic acknowledgement of mass incarceration and the repair necessary to get those tens of thousands of people out of prison who were sent there unjustly, and to repair those families, right? Like, that's the cake. Maya Angelou is the icing. What was it? They also gave, I think, Emmett Till's mother a posthumous congressional gold medal or something like that, which is a big deal again. But it's, again, symbolism. So the reason I think that it's appropriate to kind of start the conversation there is because you also had, as we're reading Black Labor, White Wealth, and I'm going to start on page 184, where Dr. Anderson talks about strategy 3, wealth and group economics. He also talks about something that you may have heard me discuss before. It's basically called the doctrine of unequal exchange. Now, the doctrine of unequal exchange kind of goes like this. It basically says Black people are losing wealth, a lot of our wealth, and have lost a ton of our wealth because we give away something very valuable, and in exchange, we receive something that's very cheap, right? And according to Dr. Anderson, this started actually back in Africa. This is one of the reasons why Africa is broke, even though it's the richest country in the world. Africa is the richest broke country in history. There's never been a rich country that was as broke as Africa. And people say, well, how can a country that is so wealthy, that has so many resources, including its people, but that doesn't count all the oil and the gold and the diamonds and everything else. How can a country that is so wealthy be so broke? Well, the doctrine of unequal exchange explains how that happens. And the interesting thing about it is that the white supremacy playbook kind of plays itself out the same way all throughout the world. It plays itself out in America. When you see rappers buying Gucci belts for $800 and the Gucci belt costs $40 to make, that's another example of the doctrine of unequal exchange. That, my friends, is a massive wealth drain. I want you to kind of understand that because a lot of the wealth game is kind of like playing a game of chess, where your goal in a chess match is I'm gonna outmaneuver you, right? You're making your moves, I'm making mine. At the end of the day, I'm gonna get more from you than you get from me. And so the economic game is the same way. So that's why financial literacy matters, because you want your kids to be able to play the chess match of economics in a way that is favorable to them. And so let me just start reading here. I'm going to read on page 184. It says strategy 3, wealth and group economics. This is a Black Labor, White Wealth. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. Now, I hope I didn't call Africa a country. If I called Africa a country, forgive me. I wasn't thinking. It's not a country. It's a continent. It's not a country. It's a continent. I'm so sorry if I said country. If I said country, then just slap me because that Africa ain't no country. Africa is a continent. You hear me? Okay. So now that we got that straight, I'm truly sorry if I said that wrong. My apologies. All right, so strategy 3, wealth and group economics. Blacks are America's most impoverished population group, but when considered as a nation within a nation, they could generate disposable income to sustain Black economies. Now, remember, just to give you some backdrop, on where black people are economically. I love doing that little fun experiment where I rank countries by GDP, and I show you how Black America's $1.4 trillion puts us in the top. I want to say top 10 in the world, something like that, relative to other countries. In fact, African Americans have more disposable income, more spending each year than Australia, Mexico, Indonesia, the Netherlands, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Poland, Taiwan, Sweden, Belgium, Thailand, Argentina, Nigeria, Iran, Austria, United Arab Emirates, Norway, Ireland, Israel, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, South Africa, Denmark, Colombia, Bangladesh, Egypt, Chile, Finland, Vietnam, Romania, Czech Republic, Portugal, Iraq, Peru, and Greece. Okay. In fact, we have more. We spend more money in a year than Kenya, Slovakia, Morocco, Kuwait, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Hungary combined. And we still have a few $100 billion left after that. So black people have a lot of money, right? Like that's the first really important thing to understand when you talk about black economics. A lot of people think black people are poor. Anybody who says that, just correct them, because that's simply not true. The other thing that's interesting about this, this myth of being poor, is that poverty generates a certain kind of mindset. Like it's like if you're an NFL team, like say the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they can't win a game to save their life, and they feel like they're a very bad team. Why? Well, because whenever the Buffalo Bills come to town, they whoop their butt. Whenever the the Dolphins come to town, they whoop their butt. The Patriots come to town, they whoop their butt. So you could watch this happen, and you can say, my God, those guys at Jacksonville are terrible football players. They're just so bad. This is horrible. Well, the guys in the Jacksonville Jaguars are not bad football players. They're very good football players. They're the best football players. They're among the best football players in the world. Maybe two or three good players could actually turn that team around. But but the thing is that you think that they're bad because of what they're being compared to. They're playing with the best players on earth, so they look very bad against those players. But if you put them up against, say, the University of Alabama, or sorry, University of Georgia, that won the national championship, well, then, the Jacksonville will probably win that game. They would dominate that game, right? Because Alabama maybe has 10 NFL players on that team. Jacksonville has, 70 or 80 NFL players on their team, right? So ultimately, black people, to some extent, our wealth is we're kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars of America. We think that our team is bad because our team isn't winning games, but we don't understand just how wealthy the white man is. All that raping and pillaging and colonizing has paid big dividends. Give me a yes in the chat if you understand what I'm saying. Give me a yes in the chat if you can at least agree with me or hear me when I tell you that black people are not as poor as everyone leads us to believe. Give me a yes in the chat. Because the first thing is, once you kind of realize you're not poor, once you realize you have resources to work with, then you're able to kind of possess a different mentality. Because remember, when I say something like, oh, black people should have a professional sports league, there are so many black people who disagree and say that's impossible. How in the hell could you do that? But here's the thing. Let me ask you a question. Black people have we spend more money than the country of Israel. Do you think it would be possible for Israel to have a professional sports league? Israel has 1/3. Their GDP is $403.96 billion. That's about a third of the spending power of the black community. Do you think the country of Israel can have a professional sports league? Give me a yes or no in the chat. Or if I say, as black people, we can have our own school system. We can educate our own kids. And people say, no, that's not possible. You need white people to educate your kids. You need white people to fund your school system. It's not possible to educate black kids. We don't have the resources. Well, I don't know. Mexico, we have more. We spend more money than the country of Mexico has in GDP. Does Mexico have a school system? Does Mexico have a school system? Does Mexico have sports leagues? Colombia, we have more. Our spending power is 4 times the gross domestic product of Colombia. Does Colombia have its own media outlets and its own professional sports leagues and its own school system? Yes or no? Yes, it does, right? So what I would say to you is, a lot of times it's not a matter of a lack of resources. It's really a matter of how you think. If you think like an originator, a leader, a boss, or whatever you want to call it, then that's what you're going to do. You're going to do what bosses do. You don't have to have a lot of money to be a boss or to be a leader. You just have to have the vision of a leader. But if you have been bred to be a follower, if you've been bred to be a sheep, then, well, sheep can never be a sheepdog. right? A sheep can never be a wolf. A sheep can never be a leader. So a lot of times, when you're raised in a specific way, when you're raised in the midst of a lot of trauma, there's a lot of trauma in the Black community, which affects the way we kind of view the world. There's a lot of victimization that's taught at an early age to say that as a Black person, the best thing you can do is be acknowledged by white people. We love to be acknowledged by white people. Pay attention to how excited Black people get whenever white people acknowledge us on some level. So, for example, give me a yes or no. How many of you think that most people would consider, not you, because you're different. You're smarter than the average bear. But how many of you think that when most Black people saw the Maya Angelou quarter being released, that they saw that as Black history? Like, this is the type of Black history. She's the first Black woman to be on a quarter, right? How many of you would agree with me if I said that, yeah, well, most Black people consider this to be Black history? Give me a yes or no. Okay, I see a lot of yeses in chat. Well, here's the deal. Here's what's interesting to me. This is something I thought about. I probably figured this out maybe 15 years ago. I remember thinking, isn't it fascinating that white people have the ability to decide when Black history is going to be made? But the thing about it is, I don't think we have the ability to decide when white history is going to be made. If I suddenly decided I was going to let a white man into the Black business school, that wouldn't be seen as white history. Like, they don't care. Or if you hear about a white guy that gets into Howard University, like we celebrate all the time, we'll say, well, he was the first Black man to graduate from Harvard. But how often do you hear about white history being made when the first white guy graduated from Howard? It's no such thing. This, being accepted by Black people is not seen as white history. And that's a really important thing you got to understand, because when you're talking about playing a game of competition, and that's what racism is. Racism is a race. It is a competition. Well, if you're competing against somebody who completely controls the game that you're competing in, it's very hard for you to win. It's really hard for you to win a game where the person you're competing with designed the game and makes the rules of the game and gets to change the rules whenever they want to. So the answer is not to try to keep winning the game. The answer is to get out of the game, right? To create a new game. And because if you create the game, then you get to make the game in your image, not in their image. You get to make the game according to your standards, not their standards. You are no longer the fish who's being measured by how well he climbs a tree. If you measure a fish's quality by how well he climbs a tree, well, he's going to look like a pretty bad fish. So you throw that sucker in the water and you say, no, this is where the fish belongs, right? So for Black people, it's a matter of, I think, when you talk about these systems, you want to understand the system so you can know how to get out of the systems and have alternative realities that allow you to manifest in the way that you best see fit. The other thing about wealth that's interesting is that the reason you think Black people are poor isn't just that they have less wealth than white people or less resources than white people, but also maybe we have to continuously focus on understanding what wealth looks like so that you can identify wealth that doesn't come in the form of a dollar bill. Because remember, that white man who oppresses you, whatever you want to call it, the oppressor, they can print money and give it to their friends. Right? They have the power to print money and give it to their friends. So if I measure my wealth compared to white folks by how many dollar bills I have compared to him, well, he's at an automatic advantage because he's printing the damn money. I'm not going to try to compare with you when you're printing the currency, right? Instead, I'm going to look at wealth in all of its forms. Black people have a lot of other forms of wealth that are not related to cash at all. Right, we have an amazing culture. We have a lot of brilliant people. We have great communities. We when our families are solid, they're super solid. When you talk about networking and the skill sets, right? So much human capital, hard work, grit, intelligence, just education. All these things that we have, those are all forms of wealth as well. And it's important for you to identify that, because if you don't, then what's going to happen is two things. One, you're going to see yourself in a disadvantageous position because you have less cash than the white man. Number two, you're going to also find yourself constantly giving away wealth and not even knowing you're giving it away. Not even knowing that you're giving it away. That's why, for example, this weekend, again, a lot of people didn't like this. I understand why people got uncomfortable when I said it, but I had to say it. I watched that football game between Georgia and Alabama. And I couldn't help but to just sort of point out very politely. I said, look, you got these black dudes that are going out there putting their necks on the line, and these white coaches are making all this money off these black athletes. They're making millions of dollars off these black players who are getting, crumbs. Well, that's an example of a wealth extraction. Part of the reason that wealth goes down is because somebody takes it. Money doesn't just get left on the street and then fly down into the gutter. When money gets left out there on the street, somebody picks that money up. So when you're asking, when somebody tells you, pay attention now. When you see these studies, how many of you, give me a yes or no if you've seen all these studies that tell you that black wealth is expected to drop to zero by 2053. Has anybody heard that? Give me a yes or no if you heard that, those studies that say, just in case you don't know, tell your friends, tell your mama, tell your cousin, tell your baby daddy, that black wealth is expected, median black wealth is expected to drop to zero by 2053. Every year, you'll see maybe Black History Month, you'll see media outlets, particularly white media, more liberal media outlets, will point out this fact, and they'll do nothing about it. There's no policy solution other than we need to get white people to be nicer to black people so that this doesn't happen, right? So they talk about it. Pay attention now. They talk about the drain of black wealth as if it's nobody's fault and as if nobody else is getting the money. You're not going to solve the math. Again, I'm a mathematician. You guys know this, right? My background's in math. And here's the thing. You're never going to solve the problem if you're not looking at all the variables in the damn equation. How the hell are you going to solve 1/3 of the problem and then act like the other 2/3 aren't there? So I'm going to agree with you. Yes, black wealth is disappearing. We know this. But my next question is, well, who the hell took it? Where did it go? How did it leak out? Who took our money? Right? Why am I crazy? Well, why am I the only person saying this? I don't see a lot of people talking about this. They'll just say, "Oh, well, we need to get more jobs for black people." No, jobs don't fix nothing. Like jobs are just over broke. Jobs aren't gonna really fix the community in a lot. Well, what I think they'll talk about jobs. Then they'll talk about some stuff that makes sense, like lending discrimination, stuff like that, which I agree with. Right? Fine. Yeah, black people should get more loans. But the real policy solutions are not actually being really discussed. The real policy solution, one, could start with something as ambitious as reparations, which I think should be something we discuss. I don't really want them to pay reparations now, to be honest with you, because I don't think they're ready to really pay what's actually owed. We're owed about $14 trillion. They're going to try to get away with like $500 billion or 200 or 300 million. So I'm not going to be like those debt collectors that'll let you settle for pennies on the dollar. I need every penny of what my ancestors died for. I don't really want a cheapskate solution. But then also some other solutions would be things like more access to capital, a consistent effort to rebuild urban communities, et cetera, right? So really at the end of the day, when you see these studies that talk about black wealth declining, I think you have to sort of ask yourself, are they just talking about it so they can feel better that they brought it up? Or are they actually talking about it so they can solve the problem? Okay. Now, by the way, everybody who's listening online, I'm going to have to shut this feed down in a minute. If you want to join the book club and join us inside the Zoom, you can go to boycewatkins.com. The link is right there at the top, and you can join the book club for free. You also get free access to the life class. Also, I want to remind you guys that this weekend, if you have any interest in things like crypto and stock options and real estate and entrepreneurship and credit and taxes and all that stuff, we're having a really great generational wealth conference in the Black Business School this weekend. That's also at boycewatkins.com. So if you'd like to join us at the generational wealth conference this weekend, we gathered about 12 different experts from the Black community who are going to hit all their different specialties of expertise, even things like how to write your first book if that's something of interest to you, etc. And so if you're interested, then just go to boycewatkins.com. The link is right there. We get started Saturday morning. We're going to go all weekend. It's going to be very, very good, just like all of our events in the Black Business School are very good, and it's virtual, so you don't have to leave your house. Okay, so I'm shutting down the online feed now, so go to boycewatkins.com if you want to join us in class. All right, so